Everyone thinks they'll be the one to defeat me. But no one's escaped me yet.
You can fight fate, but fate always wins.
Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships. Because they knew death was better than bondage.
Who filled my head with dreams? Who drove me to train until my bones cracked? Who denied me my destiny?
I am inevitable.
What if I told you that these villains weren't really villains? What if their crime wasn't being wrong, but being too right? The best villains don't want to burn the world down just for fun. They want to fix it. They see injustice, hypocrisy, suffering, and they refuse to look away. Their only crime? Going too far. But tell me this, if you were in their shoes, would you do the same? Oh, come on. We've all had at least one "the villain has a point" moment. Don't lie. Think about it. Thanos saw a universe crumbling under its own weight, drowning in overpopulation and scarcity. He didn't just wring his hands, he did something about it. Tai Lung, he wasn't some power-hungry brute. He was a warrior promised greatness, only to have it ripped away at the last second. Killmonger, he wasn't a mindless tyrant. He was a man who saw oppression and dared to rise against it, and yet, they lost. Why? Because their vision was too radical? Because the heroes couldn't stomach the cost? Or because, deep down, we fear what happens when someone proves they were right all along? Let's be real, strip away the titles of hero and villain, and what's left? Are we so sure we'd still be rooting for the same side? Be honest, you considered it. And that's the thing about great storytelling, about great characters. They make us question, they make us hesitate. Because deep down, we don't just want heroes who shine, we want villains who make sense. But how do you make that happen?
I rotted in jail for 20 years because of your weakness.
This is the blueprint, starting with being denied a destiny. Tai Lung wasn't a villain. He was a student who played by the rules, trained for years, mastered his craft. He was promised greatness, only to be told, nah, not for you. Imagine working your whole life for a promotion, only for your boss to say, actually, we're giving it to the chubby new intern. Tai Lung's rage wasn't born from evil, it was born from betrayal. The system failed him. He was right to be angry, but the way he unleashed that anger, that's where he lost us. Of course, this doesn't only apply to Tai Lung either, and that's why you need to, first, give your villain a philosophy, not just a goal. A villain with no ideology is just a thug. A villain with a philosophy? That's dangerous. A villain who simply wants power or destruction is forgettable. But one who believes, truly believes they're right, that's when they become unstoppable. Their philosophy doesn't just justify their actions, it challenges the hero's very sense of purpose. The most compelling battles aren't fought with fists or weapons, but with ideals. Take a look at these villains and their counterparts. There's a connection between each of them. Can you see what it is? They share the same goal. Take Killmonger. He and T'Challa both want to protect their people. But while T'Challa hesitated, Killmonger acted. His vision was clear. Wakanda had the power to change the world, so why weren't they? His goal? Global justice. His method? A worldwide revolution. If he had been just a little less ruthless, wouldn't we have been cheering for him? That's the trap. The best villains don't just challenge the hero, they challenge us. They hold up a mirror, forcing us to ask, if the world were just a little crueler, if we had suffered just a little more, wouldn't we have made the same choice? We understand them. We sympathize. We almost root for them. But if we would root for them, they wouldn't make a great villain. So what specific twist do writers add? Take a look at the connections once again. Thanos? Yeah, overpopulation is bad. Syndrome, yeah, gatekeeping power is unfair. Killmonger, yeah, oppressed people should fight back. But then Thanos murders half the universe. Syndrome starts murdering superheroes. Killmonger becomes a tyrant. See the pattern? They almost had it. The idea and morals behind their actions could be justified, but the way they want to reach their goal is not. And that's what makes them fascinating. But simply making their morals right and their actions wrong is not enough. You need to craft a special mark, which is something that I'll get to in point 7. You first need to understand the next, otherwise you will make the mistake of crafting a villain that is way too superficial. Take a look at Thanos, for example. What is the scariest thing about him? He wins. Not because he's strong, not because he's fast, but because his logic is airtight. If the hero can't counter their argument, if they can't prove the villain wrong, then the villain deserves to win. That's what makes a villain terrifying. Not their weapons, not their army, but the fact that the hero has no good counter-argument, except maybe because I said so. That's why we lean in, why we listen, because for a moment, it feels like they might be right. Their words cut through the noise, their vision so clear, so undeniable that even the hero hesitates. And that's the most dangerous kind of villain, the one who doesn't need to force their way to victory. They just have to convince us, just not for too long. 5th, the moment where they lose us. There's always that one scene where they cross the line. Maybe it's Thanos sacrificing Gamora. Maybe it's Killmonger burning the heart-shaped herb. Maybe it's Syndrome turning children into targets. That's when we stop cheering. That's when we step back and think, wait, maybe the hero was right. It's a tightrope. A brilliant villain walks it with precision, makes us teeter back and forth until the very end. And that's the genius of it. We turn against them because their pain warps them into something monstrous. But that pain, that's what made them human in the first place. It's what made us understand them. Because behind every villain's crusade, there's something deeper, something personal. And that's where the story begins. But why? 6, give them a personal stake. Well, a villain with a personal reason to fight is infinitely more compelling than one with vague world domination plans. Killmonger didn't just want power, he wanted justice for his father. Tai Lung didn't just want the Dragon Scroll, he wanted validation from the father figure who abandoned him. Syndrome didn't just hate superheroes, he hated that his idol rejected him. When the villain's pain is real, we feel it. And that's the terrifying part, isn't it? The villain isn't just an obstacle to overcome, they're a force of nature, reshaping everything in their path, including the hero. Because once you've faced someone with that much conviction, that much pain, that much truth, you don't walk away unchanged. Even if the villain falls, their shadow lingers, their words echo, and the hero, they'll never be the same again, which is exactly what is needed in point 7. Let the villain leave a mark. The best villains don't just challenge the hero, they change them. Thanos forced Tony Stark to make the ultimate sacrifice. Killmonger made T'Challa open Wakanda to the world. Syndrome made superheroes rethink their place in society. A villain should leave something behind, not just destruction, but a legacy. And that's why they stick with us. That's why we keep coming back, because deep down, we know they weren't completely wrong. You get it now? Righteous villains aren't just bad guys, they challenge the hero's beliefs, and sometimes they have a point. But how do you write one? How do you create a villain so compelling that the audience almost roots for them? I'll tell you.
You always say be true to yourself, but you never say which part of yourself to be true to.
A great villain isn't just evil for the sake of being evil. They aren't cackling in the dark, twirling their mustaches and going, "Because I love destruction." No, the best villains have a core belief, a philosophy that actually makes a lot of sense. It's not just, "I want power." It's, the strong should not be held back by the weak. Syndrome. Resources must be managed, no matter the cost. Thanos. Wakanda has the power to liberate the oppressed, and they refuse to use it. Killmonger. I trained my whole life to be the best, and they still denied me. Tai Lung. See the difference? Their beliefs aren't cartoonish. They reflect real-world frustrations, and that's what makes them dangerous. Take Syndrome, for example. He grew up idolizing Mr. Incredible, only to be told, "Sorry kid, you don't belong." His core belief? Superheroes shouldn't hoard power. Everyone should have a shot. But a core belief that makes sense is nothing without the second writing tip. For that tip, let's do a little thought experiment to see if you've learned it from the first part of the video. Imagine Tai Lung had been chosen as the Dragon Warrior. Would he have been a great protector? Absolutely. Would he have had compassion like Poe? Probably not. But the fact that he was so close to being the hero makes his fall even more tragic. Same with Killmonger. He and T'Challa both wanted to protect their people, but while T'Challa took a cautious approach, Killmonger said, "Enough waiting. It's time for action." If he had just been slightly less ruthless, we might have been cheering for him instead. And let's not forget Syndrome. In a twisted way, he is a hero, just one who was rejected. And when society turned him away, he became the villain they feared. But that rejection is also what made us feel for him. Which brings me to the next tip. Give them a humanizing moment. Maybe it's Thanos talking about Gamora with genuine love. Maybe it's Tai Lung's desperation when he asks, "Am I not worthy?" These moments remind us that beneath all the destruction, there's a person with real emotions. Show their pain. Killmonger isn't just a revolutionary. He's a man who grew up without a father, knowing his people were suffering while Wakanda turned its back. That's not just a motive, that's pain. Make their downfall tragic. The best villains don't just lose, they break our hearts when they do. Imagine if Tai Lung had been guided instead of rejected. Imagine if Syndrome had felt valued instead of tossed aside. If we can't help but wonder, what if, you've nailed it. Next up, the most defining feature of a righteous villain. We've covered their core belief should make sense, but their defining feature, that part doesn't make sense. Thanos doesn't try diplomacy to solve overpopulation. He wipes out half of existence. Killmonger doesn't seek justice. He seeks domination. Syndrome doesn't uplift others. He destroys anyone who is special. They had a point, and they lost it. That's the key. A great villain should make us uncomfortable. They should make us question, wait, are they the bad guy, or is it the system? That tension is what makes them compelling, because deep down, we know if they had just stopped one step earlier, they might have been the hero instead. Your villain and hero power dynamic should also be balanced out accordingly. The scariest villains aren't just strong. They don't win because they have bigger weapons, a stronger army, or a ridiculous CGI final form. No, the scariest villains win because their logic is airtight. Death in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is the embodiment of this. He doesn't win or lose, he's just a force of nature. He is inevitable. Thanos won because the Avengers had no good counterargument. They hated his methods, but they couldn't deny the problem he was trying to solve. He forced them to think, and that's what made him terrifying. And let's talk about Killmonger's final words. That gut punch of a line, "Bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who jumped from the ships because they knew death was better than bondage." That's not just villain dialogue. That's a mic drop. And it's the moment where even the audience wonders, was he really the bad guy? Or just the only one willing to do what was necessary? And their downfall? It's never just being defeated. It's all about sending a message to the viewers. A righteous villain shouldn't lose just because the plot demands it. They should lose in a way that proves them wrong. Thanos? He thought wiping out half the universe would bring balance, but 5 years later, humanity was miserable. He realized his logic was flawed, but by then, it was too late. Tai Lung? He thought power was owed to him, but in the end, it was inner peace that defeated him, the very thing he never sought. Syndrome? He wanted to prove that anyone could be super, but his own obsession with power turned him into the very thing he hated. Killmonger? He believed Wakanda needed to conquer to make a difference, but in the end, T'Challa proved there was another way, one that didn't require war. Their defeats aren't just about physical fights, they're about ideological fights. The hero doesn't just punch them into submission, the hero proves them wrong. That's what makes a righteous villain truly legendary.
Skadoosh.
Whether you're crafting a noble savior or a sinister mastermind, understanding characters like Syndrome and Death will sharpen your storytelling skills. That's why you can go back to my videos on these characters. Warning, the one about Death will send shivers down your spine. Subscribe and get ready to elevate your writing with future videos, because the best characters aren't just written, they're forged in fire.